I guess kind of start back in Cuero. When you started at the paper, how many years out of the war was that?
Oh, it was about, let me see, well, the war, I ended up the war and I came home in 46. I mean, I got out of the Army in 46, so I came back home here, I guess, in the fall of 45. But I think the Army, I got out of the Army, out of the hospital in July of 46.
Mm-hmm.
So then, from then until about, I think this whole thing started, I mean, the story started essentially in 1954, but I went to work at the paper in about 1950, something like that.
So you've been working at the paper a couple of years in
Yeah,
Cuero.
yeah, yeah. And I had moved from. I started out as sort of a farm reporter,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a daily paper, but they also had a weekly edition that went out to the farm community, and I that was sort of my responsibility. I was reporter during the rest of the week too on the daily paper, but I had to put together the weekly paper, and so I did that. And but that's how I started out at the record. But basically, it was that way.
What was a big story in Cuero normally? I mean, what kind of is big news when you're there?
Well, the big story, like a lot of small towns, is I'd hate to say it a football game or anything like that, but that's it's something that people look forward to, I guess, is that. But in terms of stories, the general run of small towns, well, it actually, for the small town or big town, but it's the taxis, the school board, all those the personalities that revolve around the county government, the city government, and all that sort of stuff. It's the same thing, only on a smaller scale than the big cities. But one of the problems in a small town is that you just you don't have the people to cover it, and
Yeah.
one person has to do it all, and or a few people, something like that. And when I came here, I remember very well. I was we lived over here on Norris Drive at that time, and I was going down to work and down here where these apartment buildings are built on top of the hill at the corner of Lamar and Barton Springs Road. So some big rocks had fallen off that cliff and were down in the street. And I thought it was a pretty good story. And I called when I got up to the Capitol. I called the paper down there and told them what had happened and asked them, did they want me to go out there and cover it? And they told me, no, we got somebody to do that. And which was that was my first lesson.
It's
And
luxury.
I had a job up there at the Capitol to cover politics and
Uh-huh.
leave that stuff alone. Somebody else would cover that.
When you were working in Cuero, when did you first get the first whiff of the story? I guess the big story.
Well, I got the first indication of it, which I did not know at that time. I didn't understand at that time, but there was a fellow that had a feed store behind the record office and across the street, across the railroad. In fact, there was right alongside the railroad track. A guy named Weber had a feed store there, and he had an employee who was a veteran, a black veteran, and he brought him one day a letter he had gotten from the land office and asked him about it. And his boss looked at it, Mr. Weber looked at it and said, well, it looks to me like you've bought some land and it's time to make a payment. And this is a done for a payment. And he said, I haven't bought no land. And so the guy brought the letter over to me and said, Ken, what do you make of this? And I told him, essentially, I looked at it and I told him about the same thing he told his employee. I said, well, it looks like he's bought some land and it's time to make a payment on it. And he said, well, that's what I told him, but he said he didn't buy any land. Well, so you just put it up there in your head and go on with stuff and figure you'll check it out someday. And so then in a week or two or something like that, I was making the rounds like you always do in small towns like that, and I would go by the district clerk's office. I had a person there that I usually checked with to see what is going on in her office.
What lawsuits have been filed, things
Yeah,
like that?
yeah, all that sort of stuff. And she asked me, she said, well, they didn't have anything going on, but she did ask me, she said, what was that big event out at at the country club last night? And I said, I don't know. I hadn't heard about it because obviously I didn't go to the country club. And, so she said, well, say we just in her said that a whole bunch of black people that were out there, and they generally didn't go to the country club
Yeah.
in Cuero in those days, or anywhere else, for that matter. But so I said, well, I don't know anything about it, but I'll try to find out. And so I went on our own staff. We had a guy named Elvin Robinson. No, Elvin. Maybe he's right. Well, anyhow, Elvin. I remember that. but I told he was the head of our stereotyping crew, and so I asked him if he knew anything about it. He said no, he didn't know anything, but he'd find out. So he finally came back to me a few days later and said, all I can find out is that they were just talking land. They were buying land and selling land. And so I was in the process of checking that out when just to see what the score was. But anyhow, that was, then I found out that Cheatham, the county attorney, he was working, I mean, he'd heard some things too, and he was looking into it. And I think that by then, I'm not sure, but it might well have been that his father, who was a state representative, a guy named Tom Cheatham, might have heard of something and was looking into something.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I brought the letter then when I found out that something was not right in it. Something was amiss in the thing. So I brought the letter that I had from whoever, from the employee there, and I brought it up to Austin to visit with the land office with Baskin Giles about. And that sort of started the whole thing. I knew that by the time I finished talking with him, I knew that he was lying to me, and that the fact is he was lying in his teeth because everything was so pat. He had an answer for everything, and everything was explained.
What was his explanation?
Well, his explanation was everything is legal. I mean, everybody signed in the right place, and they had.
Mm-hmm.
It just that the thing was they had not signed in the sequence that the law presumed anyhow, because what it was in those days, the form that was signed by the veteran had a blank place above it for the legal description of some land.
Uh-huh.
And so instead of getting the legal description of the land and going to the veteran and getting his signature and all that, they got his signature first, and they filled in the stuff up there. And they filled it in with land that was very inflated in price. Of course, the way prices have gone, maybe not so inflated, but at that time they were very, very highly inflated. And so they had that situation where the veteran signed the thing, and it was brought up here then, and Baskin sat at the head of a table with a representative from the Attorney General's office and one from the governor's office, and he would say, I've got 15 or 20 applications, they're all in order, they're all been checked out, everything's all right. Said, what is your pleasure? Somebody would say, I move it be accepted. Another one would say, I second it. So there's only 3 people on the board.
Yeah.
And who's going to argue? A couple of state employees not going to argue with the elected land commissioner. And so that's just the way the thing went. And they had they had it pretty well oiled and pretty well greased, I should say, and they had a situation in which the guy, like the veteran who bought the land, uh, he didn't even, and that's what happened in this thing. And I'm jumping ahead of myself, but they had a situation where the veteran who bought the land was not even aware of it, and somebody else made the payments on it for 3 years. And the fact is, the corporation that sold it, I mean, the people that sold the land, they inflated the price enough that they could make annual payments. Uh, like you take payment $7,500 divided by 40, with a 3% interest rate, I think, maybe 4, which was very, very cheap at the time. And so they had a good thing going in that sense, and they they were not, the land office, they were not even supposed to notify the veteran that his payment was due. They notified of all things, they notified the people that sold the land that the payment was due, and they made the payments on it. And this was just some situation where somebody made an error, and they sent this guy a letter saying it's time to make a payment on your thing. That shouldn't even have gone to him.
So they might have gotten away with it.
Yeah.
And not made the basic clerical error.
If it had gone on the way it did, but somebody, some clerk in the land office made an error and sent a letter to the guy that should have gotten the letter, to be honest about it, but wasn't supposed to get a letter. And so that was basically how they were operating that thing. And they had, a bunch of people that I think among themselves, I really believe that they knew what they were doing. And I think that even, and this is just my opinion, and I don't have anything except just politics and history to back it up. But I believe that the people that passed that thing knew then what was apt to come from it.
Bascom Giles helped push for
it. Bascom helped push it. He certainly did. And a guy that helped him in the Senate, who was a state senator at that time, a fellow named John Bell, was from Cuero. And he helped push that thing through the state Senate. And also, when we got involved in the veterans land scandals, and he was by then was a congressman, and we had supported him mightily in his race for Congress, because we were running against Corpus Christi. I mean, they had their own candidate, and so there was no real reason for us to have a congressman, except he was a man of experience, and we were behind him, and he had done all these good things for veterans, and so they were all for him, and all that sort of stuff. And so but he got involved in all this, and he was smart enough, he thought, to not become a partner, so to speak. He became he got his money in legal fees. And they had testimony to the fact that he, on one occasion, he'd just told the people he was due 1/4 of that particular transaction.
Yeah.
And he said, no, just give it to me in legal fees. So that's what he did. And so he took his money, and you can't, what the hell, he said, well, I acted as an attorney.
Yeah.
You can't do about that.
So I've read that this cost taxpayers maybe $10 million worth of fraudulent land sales. How was it trying to work through the complexities of this when you were a reporter in Cuero? I mean, you had other stories to do at the same time.
Well, you did. That was the thing. That was to me, I mean, you got a paper to put out. This is just one more of the stories that you're working on, because all these other little things have to be reported. The school board's got to be reported, and all that stuff. And so, and we had, there were other people on there that, Dinah Scarborough was one of our reporters, and she did very good at sort of filling in and taking over a lot of stuff that I would have had to do otherwise. But anyhow, yes, it was a hard job, I think. And then when it was all over with, I had developed my tuberculosis had spread again, and I had to go to the hospital for a year. So that was, and then when I came out, when I came up here to Austin.
And so, did you ever imagine that you could win the Pulitzer for the work that you did?
Oh no. Fact is, to be honest about it, that was so far out of my league. I did not feel that we were even in the same category.
I understand you were competing with the Chicago Sun-Times.
Yeah, that's what I was found out later. I didn't know it at that time. All I knew in it was that we were involved in this story, and CBS or Edward R. Murrow and his crew, or he sent his crew down. I put it like that. They came down there and did a story on our story. Then they went back and they got as far as Houston, and they found out that I was still in the running for the Pulitzer. So they sent the cameraman back to Cuero, a guy in Rossi or something. I don't know who they were, but anyhow, they sent them back, and they set up cameras in the record editorial room. And every time the phone would ring, lights would come on, and their cameras would start moving because they wanted to,
They want to
capture it or not capture it, whatever. They just figured, well, it's a chance. But it worked out fine, and it worked out all right. So I finally got a phone call.
It's an amazing piece of video where you get the phone call.
Well,
and they
yeah,
tell you got the Pulitzer.
that was something else. If it had not been for the Murrah people, I don't guess I would have gotten the phone. Well, I've gotten a phone call, but I would have been some. But their reporter, Jim Mathis, is the guy that called me, and he was with the Houston Post, and they had a reporter up there, so they knew right away and called him. Well, he called me and told me about it, and wanted to get a reaction or whatever. And so I was. Yeah, it was strange.
Now, you had talked the other day about how you kind of felt like this would have a lasting impact at the time on state government.
Well, I did, and in some ways, I don't know that it had a lasting impact upon the character of people or the way they do business. I don't think that, but it did have a very good lasting effect within the land office itself, and concerning the land laws of Texas, or the laws relating to land in Texas, particularly veterans' land. It did have lasting influence there. Where I think that it did not have lasting influence, and we see this all the time. But anyhow, I just figured in my stupidity that, well, let this be a lesson to all would-be crooks in politics, and from now on everything's going to be clean and neat and help. I mean, within a matter of few years, I was writing about Ben Jack Cage and John Milton Addison and
Bigger and better scandals.
Billy Saul Estes, and all that sort of stuff. So no, what happens? People that they look at things and say, well, he made a mistake, but I won't make that mistake. I'll do it this way. And so I don't know. I think that what it amounts to is that as long as we've got a press or people within the press who honestly will do their job, then just have to ride herd on that stuff. I mean, we're not going to do away with crooks and whatever. And it's sad to think, because I would have voted for Bascom Giles had he run for governor.
Really?
I really would have. I liked him. I thought, he was the father of Veterans Land Program, and all us vets thought that he hung the moon, and so, and if he had thought he could beat Shivers, which he couldn't, but he would have probably run, but he decided not to, and Shepard decided not to, and the reason Shepard didn't do it, didn't go, was because of this veterans land scandal. I don't think he had any part in it. I don't think Shivers had any part in it, but each one of them just sent an aide over there to represent them. And hell, neither one of them. I think a guy named Trotty for Shepherd, and one named I forgot what Shivers guy in there. But I don't think either one of them. I mean, I know his name. I think it was a little while. But Osorio, John Osorio. Uh, but neither one of them is going to argue with the land commission.
Yeah.
They're going to say, "I'll vote aye."
How would you like to be remembered for your role in this whole issue?
Oh, I would like to be remembered among those that are involved in it is the one who at least helped make the laws a little bit more honest and and cut down a good bit on the possibility of fraud and corruption in the program. If I could be remembered in those lines, I've got enough, other areas of other activity and other accomplishments or whatever to fill out 2 or 3 lifetimes, I guess. But in terms of this thing, and I would have to admit, I have always had a very fond spot in my heart for the land office and everything about it. The history of Texas is essentially the history of land. I don't care how you cut it. That's what it amounts to. And and who has it and how they got it. And a lot of things like that. But even now, I got a little bitty tract out in West Texas, and most people wouldn't think very much, but to me it's a piece of land, and not much, but hell, I go out there and the dog runs rabbits,
Yeah.
so it's nice. But so I don't know how in terms of how I would like to be remembered. Yes, I would like I would like for those people, this kind of modeling or crazy, I guess. But I'd like for those people that work in the land office to understand the charge that they have and the responsibility they
Trust,
have.
yeah.
And it's a tremendous thing. And I know you get the idea. Well, they're stuck off. People can get the ideas like this in government that, well, here I am stuck off in this thing, and nobody knows I'll exist or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, their job is very, very important. And and how they do their job is important. And, well, anyhow, I talk too much. But that's sort of the way I feel about it.
So any one of the people involved in the bureaucracy at the land office could have stood up at one point and said,
Sure.
"Hey, wait a minute, this is not
Yeah,
right."
yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of a parallel to Enron, how things went
Yeah,
up there.
yeah.
Nobody stood up.
Yeah, because if as long as, and that's what happened, as long as nobody, and I can understand, and we can all understand, and they say, well, look, I get paid to go to work in the morning, and I get paid, and at the end of the day I go home, and I do my job and all that. But that is fine, and that's true, but there are people along that chain of activity that do know what's going on, and or at least have ways to find out what's going on. Because, when I came from Cuero up here to Austin, I didn't know anybody here except one guy. He was Adjutant General of State of Texas, a guy named K.L. Berry.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I knew him, we were in the same prison camp in China, and he was on Bataan when I was on Corregidor. And he was called a hero of the pockets. He was a colonel, and anyhow. But up there in China, I knew him. He was with Wainwright's people, and they all got moved up there toward the end of the war. And so I was introduced to him there and found out about him there. And I came here, and I asked him. I said, just point me toward an honest man.
Mm-hmm.
And because I didn't know anybody, and as he pointed me toward a guy named Cavendish, and he,
You guys come
oh
on.
excuse me, I only have one good eye.
Do you want to sit over here?
What's that?
You want to sit
I'm
back
just
here?
getting some B-roll.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just getting B-roll of this right here.
So, was there pressure on you to not write the story from people in Cuero?
Well, there was some, yes, there was, but you know, the main thing I remember there is the support I got, much more more so than the pressure that was on me not to do it. Yes, we got the phone calls. You get phone calls of women crying because their husband is mixed up and they don't want that, and why don't you stop this? And you're bringing shame on our town, and that was the one I got quite a bit from good people, so to speak, that you're just bringing shame on our town. And so it was, but on the other hand, I had a lot of support in a lot of these veterans organizations. They'd pass resolutions, and we were always like a big crusade. They didn't know what the hell was going on any more than I did. But they just knew that that ought not to be, and something like that ought not to be. And so they saw somebody that's standing up and trying to, and they just, you know, a lot of them had enough knowledge of it, I guess, in a peripheral sense, to know that something ain't right, that they're going and talking to these guys, and because it was just getting started. Like I say, one guy, he's a black veteran, and he's a little smarter than most of them, but he told me, he said, hell, I knew there wasn't any land up there. But said they told me they'd give me a set of tires for my car, and so I took it and I signed their paper. And but a lot of them did think there was land because they knew that the state was doing something about land for veterans. And somebody comes along and say, yeah, this is part of that deal, and you get this free land, and you don't have to make payments on it for 3 years, and all that sort of stuff. Well, they had it worked out where some of them thought they were getting land just free. It just came to them by virtue of the fact that they were veterans. And, you know, I don't know. A lot of people.
Let me get you some water and let you take a rest here for a second.
All right.
Where are you at?
Yeah, I would appreciate a glass of water.
Yeah.
I've talked too much.